There are 3 types of grief at a cemetery: the expected kind that fades with time, the performative kind that needs an audience, and the kind that destroys you from the inside out. Alessandro Moretti recognized the 3rd type instantly because he'd been drowning in it for 6 months. So when he saw a stranger at his 7-year-old son's grave crying with the same soul-crushing agony that kept him awake at night, he knew 2 things for certain. She wasn't a stranger, and she was hiding something worth killing for. The rain hammered down on Sacred Heart Cemetery like God himself was weeping. Alessandro stood 50 feet away beneath a black umbrella, watching the woman in the yellow raincoat collapse to her knees in front of Andrew's headstone. She'd placed pink roses against the polished granite, and her entire body shook with sobs that made no sound. Alessandro's jaw tightened. In his world, information was currency, and this woman was spending capital she shouldn't have. The pink roses weren't random. Andrew had loved pink obsessively, defiantly, beautifully. "Pink is happy, Papa," he'd said once, the last time Alessandro had actually been home for dinner. "It makes the sad go away." The sad hadn't gone away. It had swallowed everything. Alessandro pulled his phone from his coat pocket, snapped 3 photos of the woman, and texted them to his head of security with 2 words: "Find her." Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, like the video and share with loved ones, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. He'd been coming to this cemetery every Thursday at 4 p.m. for 26 weeks. Routine was dangerous in his line of work, but grief didn't care about safety protocols. This was his penance, an hour alone with a headstone that read Andrew Moretti, 2018 to 2025, beloved son. 7 years on Earth. 7 years Alessandro had spent building an empire instead of building memories. The woman's yellow raincoat was cheap, the kind you bought at a drugstore. Her dark hair hung wet and tangled past her shoulders. She was young, mid-20s maybe, and something about the way she touched the gravestone made Alessandro's instincts scream. She touched it like she had the right to. He walked toward her, his Italian leather shoes squelching in the mud. The woman didn't notice him until his shadow fell across Andrew's grave. She looked up, and Alessandro saw her face for the first time. Young. Pretty in an exhausted way, with dark circles under red-rimmed eyes. But it was her expression that stopped him, raw devastation mixed with terror, like she'd been caught committing a crime. "Who are you?" Alessandro's voice was quiet, controlled, the voice he used before people disappeared. The woman scrambled to her feet, roses tumbling from her hands. I'm sorry. I was just... Who are you?" Not a question this time. "Nobody. I'm nobody. I was just paying respects." "To a child you never met?" Alessandro took a step closer. She backed up, nearly tripping over the grave marker behind her. "I know everyone who knew my son. Every teacher, every friend, every distant relative. I've never seen you before." The woman's eyes darted toward the parking lot. Alessandro didn't move, but he knew his driver Marco was already blocking her car. She was trapped, and the calculation behind her panic told him she knew it. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "I shouldn't have come." "But you did. Why?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Her hands were shaking, Alessandro noticed. Not the trembling of someone cold, but the shaking of someone terrified. "The roses," Alessandro said softly. "Pink roses. Andrew's favorite. How did you know that?" The woman's face went completely white. I didn't. I just thought..." "Lie." Alessandro's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough that she couldn't run. "I'm going to ask you one more time, and I suggest you think very carefully about your answer. How did you know my son?" Tears spilled down her cheeks, mixing with rain. "Please. You don't understand. Then make me understand." "I can't." Her voice broke. "If I tell you, I'll what?" Alessandro leaned in close enough to smell her shampoo, something cheap and floral. "I've had 6 months of questions with no answers. 6 months of wondering who killed my son and made it look like an accident. And now a stranger shows up at his grave, crying like she lost someone she loved, knowing details she shouldn't know." His grip tightened slightly. "So you're going to talk. Either here, or somewhere much less comfortable." The woman's eyes widened. "You think it was murder?" Alessandro went very still. "What makes you say that? The way you said made it look like an accident. You don't believe he drowned." Smart. She was smart. Alessandro released her wrist but didn't step back. Answer my question. She wiped her face with shaking hands. I knew him, okay? I knew Andrew. I used to. I saw him sometimes, around the neighborhood. He was always so happy, so full of life, and when I heard what happened, she trailed off, more tears coming. It was a decent lie. Might have even worked on someone who wasn't trained to spot deception. But Alessandro had built his empire on reading people, and this woman was hiding something massive behind those terrified eyes. What's your name? She hesitated too long. Sarah. Another lie. Alessandro smiled, cold and sharp. No, it's not. It is Marco, Alessandro called without turning around. His driver materialized from behind a mausoleum like a well-dressed ghost. Take Miss Sarah to the car. We're going to continue this conversation somewhere with fewer witnesses. The woman's terror spiked into panic. No, please. I haven't done anything wrong. Then you have nothing to worry about. Alessandro finally stepped back, gesturing for Marco to take over. But something tells me we both know that's not true. Marco's massive hand closed around her arm. The woman looked at Alessandro with desperate, pleading eyes. Please, you have to understand. I loved him too. Alessandro froze. What did you say? Andrew. I loved him too. I know you don't believe me, but it's true. And I think, she swallowed hard, I think someone murdered him, and I've been trying to prove it. The cemetery fell silent except for the rain. Alessandro studied her face, looking for the lie, for the angle. But all he saw was grief that mirrored his own. You have 30 seconds to convince me not to make you disappear, Alessandro said quietly. Starting now. The woman, not Sarah, whoever she really was, drew a shaking breath. The day Andrew died, I was watching your house. I've been watching for months, and I saw someone near the pool house. Someone who shouldn't have been there. She met his eyes directly for the first time. Someone wearing your family crest. Alessandro's blood went cold. Explain. Not here. Not out in the open. She glanced at Marco, then back to Alessandro. If I tell you what I know, I'm signing my own death warrant. So I need something from you first. You're in no position to negotiate. I'm in the only position that matters. I have information you need, and you're the only person with the power to protect me while we find out who killed your son. She straightened, despite Marco's grip, despite her fear. So yes, Mr. Moretti, I am negotiating. For the first time in 6 months, Alessandro felt something other than grief, curiosity. This woman, this terrified, lying, mysterious woman knew something, and she was brave enough or desperate enough to gamble her life on it. Get in the car, Alessandro said finally. We'll talk at my estate, and if I even suspect you're wasting my time. He didn't finish the threat. Didn't need to. The woman nodded, and Marco led her toward the black SUV parked at the cemetery gates. Alessandro stayed behind for a moment, looking down at his son's grave, at the pink roses scattered in the mud. I'm sorry, baby. The woman had whispered it, the exact words Alessandro said every time he visited, the exact same devastating tone. He pulled out his phone as he walked to the car. His security chief had already responded with a name. Joan Cohen, 25, 2 jobs, clean record, lives alone in Riverside District. Alessandro stared at the photo attached to the message. Joan Cohen. Finally, a name for the woman in yellow. But as he climbed into the SUV and saw her sitting rigid and terrified in the back seat, Alessandro realized the name didn't matter. What mattered was the question burning in his mind. How did a stranger love his son enough to risk everything for the truth? And what was she really hiding? Joan Cohen's apartment was a confession written in newspaper clippings and red string. Alessandro stood in the doorway of her tiny one-bedroom in the Riverside District, taking in the wall that had been transformed into an investigation board. Photos of his estate, timeline notes, printed articles about Andrew's death, a map with routes marked in different colored ink. This wasn't casual curiosity. This was obsession. Breaking and entering is illegal, Mr. Moretti, Joan said from where Marco had positioned her on the worn couch. Her fear had transformed into something harder during the silent car ride, resignation mixed with defiance. So is stalking. Alessandro moved closer to the wall, examining her work. She'd been thorough. Disturbingly thorough. How long have you been watching my family? Long enough to know your security has a gap in coverage between 2 and 2:17 a.m. when the cameras reset. She lifted her chin. Long enough to know you leave for the office at 6:45 every morning. Long enough to know that 6 months ago, someone breached that gap. Alessandro turned to face her. You said you saw someone with my family crest. I have photos. Joan nodded toward a locked drawer in her desk. Bottom drawer. The key is taped under the lamp. Marco retrieved them without being asked. He handed Alessandro a manila folder, bulging with printed photographs. Alessandro opened it, and his world tilted slightly. The photos were grainy, taken from a distance with a cheap camera, but clear enough. A man in a dark jacket near the pool house. Timestamp: 1:47 p.m., the day Andrew died. Alessandro had been in a meeting in the city. His wife had been dead for 2 years by then. Andrew had been alone except for the housekeeper, who'd found him floating face down 40 minutes later. Alessandro zoomed in on one photo. They're partially visible on the man's neck. The Moretti family crest, a tattoo only given to made men in his organization. Who is he? Joan's voice was quiet. I don't know. Alessandro's jaw clenched. But I'm going to find out. He looked at her sharply. Why didn't you go to the police? Joan laughed, bitter and sharp. And tell them what? That I was illegally surveilling a mafia boss's house and happened to catch a photo of one of his own men? They'd either ignore me or I'd end up dead in a ditch. She met his eyes. I needed proof first. Real proof. Something that couldn't be disappeared. So you've been investigating on your own. Alessandro gestured at the wall. For 6 months. Working 2 jobs, he'd read the file Marco compiled during the drive. As a waitress and a night cleaner, barely making rent. Spending every spare moment trying to solve the murder of a child you claim to have seen around the neighborhood. He moved closer until he was standing directly in front of her. Want to try that story again? Joan's hands clenched in her lap. It's the truth. It's a truth, not the truth. Alessandro crouched down to her eye level. I'm going to tell you something, Joan Cohen. I've been lied to by professionals, people whose lives depended on me believing them. You're good, but you're not that good. He tapped the folder. These photos save your life. The fact that you've been trying to find my son's killer earns you a conversation. But if you want my help, if you want my protection, you need to tell me why you really care. Silence stretched between them. Rain pattered against the window. Somewhere in the building, a baby cried. I can't, Joan finally whispered. Can't or won't? Both. She looked up at him, eyes shining with unshed tears. Because if I tell you the truth, you'll either kill me or never believe another word I say. And I need you to believe me about what I saw. Alessandro studied her face. Fear, yes, but also something else, guilt that ran bone deep. This woman was carrying a secret that was eating her alive. Then we have a problem, Alessandro said, standing. Because I don't work with people I can't trust. You don't have a choice. Joan stood too, squaring her shoulders despite the tremor in her voice. That man in the photo? He's not the only one. There's been someone watching your house every Tuesday for the past month. Different car each time, but same pattern. They're looking for something. Or waiting for something. She pulled out another folder from under her couch cushion. She'd been prepared for this, Alessandro realized. I have license plates, times, locations. Without me, you're blind. Alessandro flipped through the new photos. She was right. Different vehicles, different men, but the same surveillance pattern. Someone was monitoring his estate, and his own security hadn't caught it. Why Tuesdays? He asked. That's what I've been trying to figure out. Joan moved to her investigation wall, pointed to a calendar she'd marked up. It started 4 weeks ago. Always between 8 and 11 p.m. Always parked 3 blocks away with a sightline to your front gate. She turned to him. What happens at your house on Tuesday nights? Alessandro's blood went cold. My security briefing. Every Tuesday at 9 p.m., my entire team meets in my study to review the week's threats and protocols. Which means someone in that room is feeding information to whoever's watching. The implications crashed over Alessandro like a wave. A traitor in his inner circle. Someone close enough to know his routines, his security gaps, his vulnerabilities. Someone who'd been there the day Andrew died. I need names, Alessandro said quietly. Everyone who was at the pool house that day. Everyone who had access. I need protection, Joan countered. Real protection. Not just Marco following me around. Because the moment your traitor realizes I have evidence, I'm dead. Alessandro's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and went very still. What? Joan asked. The man in your photo. The one at the pool house. Alessandro showed her the screen. A message from his security chief. His name was Marco Castellano, one of my oldest soldiers. He looked up at Joan. He was just found dead in a warehouse on the east side. Execution style. Happened sometime last night. Joan's face drained of color. They're cleaning up loose ends, which means they know someone's asking questions. Alessandro's mind raced through possibilities, angles, threats. Grab whatever you need. You're not staying here. Where am I going? Somewhere I can keep you alive long enough to find out who's killing people connected to my son. He moved to the door, then paused. And Joan? Eventually you're going to tell me the truth about why you really care about Andrew. Because whatever you're hiding, it's going to come out. Secrets always do in my world. Joan grabbed a bag, started shoving clothes into it with shaking hands. There's something else you should know. What? She pulled out one more photo from her investigation wall. This one was different, older, faded. A woman outside an adoption agency, heavily pregnant, face turned partially away. The date stamp read 7 years ago. I found this in a database I shouldn't have been able to access. It was taken the same day. Andrew's adoption was finalized. Joan's voice was barely a whisper. Your wife was at Catherine's agency that day. And she wasn't alone. Alessandro took the photo, staring at the pregnant girl who was almost, but not quite, out of frame. Something about her profile nagged at him. Who is she? He asked. Joan's silence was answer enough. Alessandro looked from the photo to Joan, and suddenly the pieces started shifting in his mind. The obsession, the grief, the desperate need to find Andrew's killer, the guilt she carried like a stone. We're leaving. Now. He pocketed the photo. And when we get to my safe house, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about adoption agencies and secrets and lies. Joan followed him out of the apartment, and Alessandro noticed she didn't argue. She didn't argue because she knew, just like he did, that the truth was already unraveling, and there was nowhere left to run. Alessandro's safe house was nothing like Joan expected. She'd imagined something cold and industrial, a warehouse with concrete floors and harsh lighting. Instead, she found herself in a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, all floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. A golden cage was still a cage. You'll stay here until we figure out who's trying to kill witnesses, Alessandro said, setting her bag down in the marble foyer. Marco will be outside your door. 2 more men in the lobby. No one gets in or out without my approval. Joan moved to the windows, looking down at the city lights 20 stories below. I'm a prisoner. You're alive. There's a difference. Alessandro poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. He didn't offer her one. Now, the adoption photo. Start talking. Joan turned to face him. This was it, the moment she'd been dreading and preparing for. She could tell him the truth and watch him either kill her or throw her out. Or she could lie and buy herself more time. More time to find Andrew's killer. More time to understand why her son had died. I was investigating your wife, Joan said, choosing her words carefully. After Andrew's death, I started digging into everything. The coroner's report, the police file, and I found inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? The kind that suggested your wife had secrets. Big ones. Joan pulled out her phone, brought up the notes she'd compiled. Gabriella Moretti died 2 years before Andrew. Cancer, according to the death certificate. But before she died, she made massive payments to Catherine's adoption agency. Hundreds of thousands of dollars over a 2-year period. Alessandro's expression didn't change, but Joan saw his knuckles whiten around his glass. Continue. I hacked into the agency's database, don't ask me how, and I found Andrew's adoption file. Joan watched his face carefully. Did you know your son was adopted? The silence that followed was deafening. Alessandro set down his glass with deliberate precision. What did you just say? Andrew Moretti wasn't your biological son. Your wife adopted him 7 years ago through a closed adoption. The birth mother's identity was sealed. The birth father was listed as unknown. Joan's heart hammered. You really didn't know. Alessandro moved so fast Joan didn't have time to react. One moment he was across the room. The next his hand was around her throat, not squeezing. But the threat was clear. You're lying. Check for yourself. Joan's voice came out strangled. The files are in my cloud storage. Password is Andrew2018. Look at the birth certificate. Look at the adoption papers. Your wife forged your signature on the finalization documents. Alessandro released her, and Joan gasped for air. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. Joan watched emotions flicker across his face: disbelief, rage, confusion, and finally, devastating comprehension. "She lied to me," he whispered. "For 7 years, she lied." "I think she couldn't have children," Joan said softly. "I think she was desperate to give you an heir, to secure your legacy. So she found a baby and made you believe he was yours." Alessandro sank into a chair, the phone trembling in his hands. "I never questioned it. She told me she was pregnant, showed me ultrasounds. I was too busy with the business to go to appointments, so I just believed her." He looked up at Joan with hollow eyes. What kind of father doesn't even notice his own son isn't his? "The kind who loved him anyway," Joan said. "Blood doesn't make a parent. You raised him. You provided for him. That made him yours. But I didn't raise him. I was never there." Alessandro's voice cracked. "And now he's dead, and I can't even." He trailed off, something dawning in his expression. "You said the birth mother's identity was sealed." Joan's stomach dropped. "Yes, but you found the photo. The pregnant girl at the agency." Alessandro stood, pulling the faded photograph from his pocket. This was taken the day Andrew was born, the day the adoption was finalized. He moved closer to Joan, holding the photo up next to her face. "She's about 18 in this picture. Dark hair, similar build, same profile. Lots of girls look like that. And 7 years later, that girl would be 25. Alessandro's eyes bored into hers. "The same age you are now, Joan Cohen." Joan's carefully constructed lies crumbled. She could see it in his face, he knew. Maybe he'd suspected from the moment he saw her crying at the grave, but now he knew. "I need you to tell me something," Alessandro said quietly. "And I need you to tell me the truth, because if you lie to me right now, I will never believe another word you say." He set the photo down on the table between them. "Are you Andrew's birth mother?" Joan's vision blurred with tears. 7 years of secrets. 7 years of watching from a distance. 7 years of wondering if she'd made the right choice. And now, standing in front of the man who'd raised her son, she had nowhere left to hide. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm his mother." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Alessandro stared at her, processing, calculating. Joan watched him decide whether to kill her or keep her alive. "You gave him away," Alessandro finally said. "I was 18, broke, in an abusive relationship with a man who would have destroyed him." Joan's voice shook. "I thought I was giving him a better life. The agency promised me he'd go to a good family, that he'd have everything I couldn't provide. And then you came back. I never stopped watching. I found out where he was 2 years ago. Started following from a distance, just to make sure he was okay." Tears streamed down Joan's face. "And then he died, and I realized someone had murdered my baby, and no one was doing anything about it because they ruled it an accident." Alessandro paced the room like a caged animal. "So this entire time, the investigation, the surveillance, the grief, you were mourning your own son." "Our son," Joan corrected. "He was yours too. You raised him. You loved him. That makes you his father more than biology ever could." "Don't." Alessandro's voice was sharp. "Don't try to make this about shared grief. You gave him up. You walked away. To save him." Joan's voice rose. "His biological father was a monster. I gave Andrew up so he'd have a chance at a real life. A safe life. And your wife gave him that. She gave him you. And then someone took him away from both of us." Alessandro stopped pacing, turned to face her. "Does anyone else know you're his birth mother?" "No." "The adoption was sealed. Not even the agency could tell you without a court order." "Then how did you find him?" Joan hesitated. "I paid someone to hack the records. It took every dollar I'd saved for 2 years. But I had to know he was okay. I had to see him, even if he never knew who I was." Alessandro moved to the window, looking out at the city. "The man who killed Andrew, Marco Castellano, he was at the pool house that day, but someone gave him orders. Someone high up in my organization." He turned back to Joan. "If they knew Andrew wasn't my biological son, they might have killed him to weaken my claim to leadership. Bloodline matters in my world." "Then we find who knew," Joan said. "We find who gave the order, and we make them pay." "We?" Alessandro's laugh was bitter. "You think I trust you now? You've lied to me from the moment we met. I lied to stay alive long enough to find justice for our son, and I'm the only person in the world who wants his killer dead as much as you do." Joan stepped closer. You need me, Alessandro. I have evidence. I have access to places you don't, and I'm not going to stop until whoever killed Andrew is in the ground. Alessandro studied her for a long moment. If you betray me, I won't. If you're working with whoever killed him, I'm not. If I find out you're lying about anything else, then kill me, Joan said simply. But until then, we're partners. Alessandro's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression darkened. Get some rest. Tomorrow we're going to Street Catherine's agency. Someone there knows more than they're saying. He headed for the door. Alessandro, Joan called. He paused. I'm sorry. For lying. For everything. Sorry doesn't bring him back, Alessandro said without turning around. But maybe revenge will help us both sleep at night. He left, and Joan was alone in the golden cage. She moved to the window, looking out at the city where somewhere, Andrew's killer was walking free. I'm going to find who hurt you, baby, she whispered to her reflection. I promise. Outside the door, Alessandro stood motionless, his hand pressed against the wall. Andrew's birth mother. The woman he'd been hunting was the woman who'd given his son life, and he had no idea whether to protect her or destroy her. Joan didn't sleep. How could she, knowing Alessandro Moretti now held the truth that could destroy her? She spent the night on the penthouse balcony, watching the city lights blur through exhausted tears, replaying every moment she'd ever seen Andrew from a distance. The time he'd laughed at the park, chasing pigeons, the time he'd helped an elderly woman pick up groceries she'd dropped, the time he'd drawn a picture at a cafe window, a family of 3 holding hands. She'd never gotten to hold his hand. When dawn broke, Alessandro appeared at her door without knocking. His suit was different, but his expression was the same, carefully controlled rage barely contained beneath an expensive exterior. We're going to my estate first, he said. Then the agency. Why your estate? Because you're going to tell me everything you know about my son. Every moment you watched him. Every detail you remember. His voice was ice. And then we're going to Andrew's room. The drive was silent except for the hum of tires on asphalt. Joan sat in the back of the SUV, feeling Marco's suspicious glare from the front seat. He knew something had shifted between her and Alessandro, but not what. Alessandro's estate was exactly as Joan remembered from her surveillance, imposing iron gates, manicured lawns, security cameras everywhere. But seeing it from inside the gates felt different, invasive, like she was trespassing on sacred ground. This way, Alessandro said, leading her through the marble foyer. The house was a museum of wealth and emptiness, high ceilings, expensive art, and photos, so many photos of Andrew. The boy smiled from every wall, frozen in moments of joy that would never come again. Joan stopped at one picture, Andrew covered in paint, holding up a canvas with tiny handprints. He couldn't have been more than 5. He made that on my birthday, Alessandro said quietly behind her. I was in Prague. Didn't even call him that day. Joan touched the frame gently. He talked about you constantly, didn't he? How would you know? Because I saw the drawings. In the cafe windows, at the park. Always the same figure, a tall man in a suit. My papa, the caretaker said he'd call them. Joan turned to Alessandro. He was waiting for you to come home. Alessandro's jaw clenched. This way. He led her upstairs to a bedroom door that looked like it hadn't been opened in months. Alessandro's hand hovered over the handle, and Joan saw it trembling. I haven't been in here since the funeral, he admitted. I couldn't. Then let me, Joan said softly. She reached past him and opened the door. Andrew's room was a time capsule of childhood. Race car bed, shelves overflowing with books and toys, drawings covering every available surface. But it was the paintings that made Joan's breath catch, dozens of them, each one showing a different version of happiness. A boy playing soccer, a boy at the beach, a boy hugging a woman who looked nothing like Gabriella. He kept asking about his birth mother. Alessandro said, moving to stand beside her. Gabriella told him she died in childbirth, that he was a miracle we almost lost. His voice broke. Another lie. Joan moved to the paintings, studying the woman in them. Dark hair, warm smile. The face was vague, dreamlike, but the love in the brushstrokes was unmistakable. He was painting you, Alessandro realized. He was painting a mother he never met. Tears streamed down Joan's face. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm so sorry I gave him up. Why did you? Alessandro's question wasn't accusatory, it was genuine. Tell me the real story. Not the version you prepared. The truth. Joan sank onto Andrew's bed, surrounded by his things, and finally let the walls crumble completely. His father's name was David Russo. I met him when I was 17. He was charming, intense, dangerous in ways I thought were exciting. She laughed bitterly. I was an idiot. By the time I realized what he really was, I was pregnant and trapped. What was he? Violent, connected. He worked for one of the smaller families in the city enforcement, mostly. Breaking bones, burning buildings. When I told him I was pregnant, Joan's hands shook. He said no son of his would be raised soft, that he'd make the baby into a soldier. Alessandro's expression darkened. So you ran. I stole money from his jacket while he was passed out drunk and got on a bus. Ended up in a shelter 3 states away. That's where the social worker found me. Joan wiped her eyes. She said there were families who wanted babies. Good families, rich families, people who could give a child everything I couldn't. Street Catherine's agency. They promised closed adoption. Promised David would never find him. I signed the papers in the hospital an hour after giving birth. Didn't even get to hold him. Joan's voice cracked. The nurse said it would be easier that way, that I should just let him go and move on with my life. But you didn't. I couldn't. He was mine. Is mine. Biology doesn't stop mattering just because you sign papers. Joan looked at Alessandro. I thought about him every single day for 7 years. Wondered if he was happy, if he was loved, if he was safe. And then you found him. 2 years ago. I'd saved enough money to hire a private investigator. He tracked the adoption to your wife. I came to the city, got a job, started watching. Joan stood, moved to the window overlooking the estate grounds. I saw him playing in the yard, laughing, running, and I thought I'd made the right choice. Until he died. Until someone murdered him. Joan turned back. And I realized that giving him up didn't keep him safe. It just meant I wasn't there when he needed me most. Alessandro moved to Andrew's desk, opened a drawer. Inside were dozens of letters, each one addressed to my real mama, in a child's careful handwriting. He handed one to Joan. Her hands shook as she read, Dear real mama, Papa says you're in heaven watching over me. I hope heaven is nice. I made you a painting today. It's you and me at the beach. Maybe one day we can go together. Love, Andrew. Joan collapsed. The letter fell from her hands as sobs racked her body. Alessandro knelt beside her, and for the first time since they'd met, he didn't look at her with suspicion or rage. He looked at her with understanding. He loved you, Alessandro said quietly. He loved the idea of you, and you loved him enough to give him up. He picked up the letter. That's more sacrifice than I ever made. You gave him a home, a life. You were his father. I was a stranger in a suit who signed checks and missed birthdays. Alessandro's voice was raw. You want to know the worst part? The day he died, I was in a meeting. My assistant called 3 times. I ignored it because I was negotiating a weapons deal. He looked at Joan with devastated eyes. My son drowned, and I was arguing over the price of guns. They sat in Andrew's room, 2 broken people united by impossible grief. We find who killed him, Joan finally said. We make them suffer, and then maybe we can both forgive ourselves. Alessandro stood, offering his hand. Joan took it, and he pulled her to her feet. Street Catherine's agency, he said. Someone there knows who else had access to Andrew's adoption records. Someone there knows who wanted him dead. They left Andrew's room together, and Joan noticed Alessandro didn't close the door this time. Maybe he was finally ready to let the grief breathe. Or maybe he was ready to turn it into something more dangerous. Vengeance. In the hallway, Joan paused. Alessandro, what happened to David Russo? Andrew's biological father? Alessandro's expression went cold. According to my sources, he disappeared 5 years ago, presumed dead in a gang dispute. Presumed? Bodies were never found. In my world, that usually means they're either very dead or very much alive and hiding. He looked at her sharply. Why? Because if he's alive and somehow found out about Andrew, Joan's blood ran cold. He'd want his son back. Alessandro pulled out his phone, already dialing. Marco, I need everything you can find on David Russo. Last known associates, last known location, everything. He hung up and looked at Joan. If he's alive, we find him before he finds us. And if he already knows Andrew's dead? Alessandro's smile was predatory. Then we find out if he was the one who gave the order. And if he was. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Some promises were better kept in silence. Street Catherine's adoption agency looked like a place where hope went to die. The building stood in a forgotten part of the city, wedged between a laundromat and a boarded-up pawn shop, peeling paint, barred windows. A faded sign that had once promised new beginnings, now just promised desperation. This is where my wife found Andrew? Alessandro stared at the building with disgust. This is where you gave birth to my son? I gave birth in a hospital, Joan corrected quietly. But this is where I signed the papers. She hadn't been back in 7 years. Every cell in her body screamed to run. Alessandro's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression darkened. Marco found something. David Russo was declared dead 5 years ago. But there's no death certificate. No body. Just a report filed by his former associates claiming he disappeared after a deal gone wrong. Which means he's alive. Which means someone wanted people to think he was dead. Alessandro pocketed his phone. Let's find out who knew about Andrew's adoption. Then we find out if Russo's ghost has been watching my family. The agency's interior was worse than the exterior: fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, and the smell of old paper and broken dreams. A woman sat behind a desk that had seen better decades, filing her nails with mechanical precision. We're closed, she said without looking up. Alessandro placed a stack of $100 bills on the desk. The nail file stopped moving. We're looking for information, Alessandro said. About an adoption that took place 7 years ago. The woman looked at the money, then at Alessandro's face, and her expression shifted to recognition and fear. Mr. Moretti, I didn't realize. You know who I am. Good. That saves time. Alessandro leaned forward. I need to speak with whoever handled my son's adoption. Now. That would be Sister Margaret. But she doesn't work here anymore. Left about 6 months ago. Right after FI. The woman stopped abruptly. Right after what? Joan asked. Right after your son's accident. The woman's voice dropped to a whisper. She was real upset about it. Kept saying it was her fault. That she should have protected him. Alessandro and Joan exchanged glances. Where can we find her? I don't know. She just left one day. Didn't even pack her desk. Just disappeared. The woman pushed the money back across the desk. Look, I don't want trouble. Whatever you're looking for, I don't know anything. You're lying. Joan moved closer. Sister Margaret handled my adoption. She knew everything: the birth father's name, the sealed records, all of it. Someone paid her to hide that information. Who? The woman's hands trembled. I told you. I don't... Alessandro pulled out his gun and placed it gently on the desk. Let me rephrase my friend's question. Who paid Sister Margaret to hide the adoption records? Jesus Christ. The woman's face went pale. Okay. There was a man. Came here about 8 months ago. Said he was looking for information about a child born 7 years ago. Sister Margaret refused at first, but then he showed her something, a photo, I think, and she went white as a sheet. What did the man look like? Joan's heart hammered. Tall, dark hair, scar running down his left cheek. Mean-looking. The woman swallowed. He had a tattoo on his neck, some kind of family crest. Alessandro's expression went deadly calm, the kind of calm that preceded violence. Lorenzo. You know him? Joan asked. My cousin. Second in command of my organization. Alessandro's voice was ice. He's been at every Tuesday security briefing. He had access to my house. He knew Andrew's routines. He turned back to the woman. What did Lorenzo want from Sister Margaret? The name of the birth father. He kept asking about the birth father. Said it was important for some legal thing. The woman was crying now. Sister Margaret finally told him. I don't know what she said, but after he left she was terrified. Started packing up her files, talking about how she needed to disappear before they found her. They? Joan leaned forward. Who's they? I don't know. She wouldn't tell me. Just said that she'd made a mistake 7 years ago, and now people were going to die because of it. The woman grabbed Alessandro's arm. Please, I've told you everything. Just let me go. Alessandro stood. Where does Sister Margaret live? She had an apartment above the Holy Rosary Church on Millbrook Street. That's all I know, I swear. Alessandro pocketed his gun and left the money on the desk. If you call anyone police, Lorenzo, anyone I'll know, and you won't like what happens next. They left the agency and climbed back into the SUV. Alessandro immediately called Marco. I need surveillance on Lorenzo. Everything he does, everywhere he goes. Don't let him know he's being watched. He hung up and looked at Joan. Lorenzo knew about the adoption. He knew Andrew wasn't my blood. And if he knew that, he could have used it to challenge your leadership, Joan finished. Andrew's death wasn't just murder. It was a coup. Not just a coup. It was personal. Alessandro's hands clenched into fists. Lorenzo and I grew up together. I trusted him with everything. And he killed my son to take what's mine. We don't know for certain. Yes, we do. The tattoo. The timing. The fact that he was asking about Andrew's birth father. Alessandro's voice was deadly quiet. He wanted to know who David Russo was, which means he found him. Joan's blood ran cold. You think Lorenzo and David are working together? I think Lorenzo found a man who wanted his son back and promised to help him get Andrew if David helped eliminate me. Alessandro's jaw clenched, but Andrew died before David could claim him. So now what? What happens when David Russo realizes his son is dead? He comes for revenge, Joan whispered. He comes for everyone involved. The SUV pulled up to Holy Rosary Church, a small stone building that looked like it had been forgotten by time. The apartment entrance was around the back, up a narrow staircase that smelled like mildew and regret. Alessandro knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder. Still nothing. Sister Margaret, Joan called through the door. Please. We need to talk about Andrew Moretti, about the adoption. We know Lorenzo came to see you. We know you're scared, but we can protect you. Silence. Alessandro pulled out his lockpick set. 30 seconds later, the door swung open. The apartment was chaos. Furniture overturned, papers scattered everywhere, blood on the carpet. No, Joan breathed. They found Sister Margaret in the bedroom, sitting in a chair with her hands zip-tied behind her back. Her face was bruised, swollen, but she was alive barely. Sister Margaret. Alessandro knelt beside her, cutting the zip ties. Who did this? The nun's eyes were unfocused, drifting. Too late. It's too late. I tried to fix it. Tried to keep the secret. Tried. What secret? Joan grabbed her hand. Sister Margaret, please. It's me. Joan Cohen. I gave birth to Andrew 7 years ago. I need to know what you told Lorenzo. Sister Margaret's eyes found Joan's face and filled with tears. I'm so sorry. So sorry. I didn't know what she was doing. Didn't know until it was too late. Who? Alessandro demanded. Who are you talking about? Mrs. Moretti. Gabriella. Sister Margaret coughed, and blood flecked her lips. She didn't just adopt your baby, Joan. She paid me to hide something else. Something worse. What did she hide? Joan's voice shook. The father. David Russo. I told her his name, and she said she'd take care of it. Make sure he never found the baby. Sister Margaret's breathing was labored, but she didn't kill him. She paid him off, gave him money to disappear, and when Lorenzo found out, he tracked David down, brought him back. Alessandro's face went white. David Russo is alive, and Lorenzo brought him here. Not just here. Sister Margaret grabbed Alessandro's jacket with surprising strength. He's in the city, Lorenzo told him about Andrew. About you. About Joan. She looked at Joan with desperate eyes. He thinks Andrew is still alive. Lorenzo is using him to get close to you, to destroy everything. Where are they? Alessandro's voice was lethal. I don't know. They beat me to find out where Joan was, but I didn't tell them. I swear I didn't. Sister Margaret convulsed, and more blood came up. We need to get her to a hospital, Joan said. No time. Sister Margaret grabbed Joan's hand. There's something else. Something Gabriella made me promise never to tell. What? Andrew wasn't the only baby. Sister Margaret's eyes were fading. 7 years ago, there were 2 pregnancies, 2 adoptions processed the same day. Gabriella took Andrew, but there was another family, another baby born the same day to a different mother. Joan's world tilted. What are you saying? I'm saying Lorenzo lied to David Russo. Told him he had 2 children, a son and a daughter, both given up for adoption. Sister Margaret's grip weakened. He's looking for both of them, and he won't stop until he finds them. But there is no daughter, Alessandro said. That's a lie Lorenzo created to manipulate David. No. Sister Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. There is a daughter, born the same day as Andrew. Different mother. But David Russo is listed as the father on her birth certificate too. Her eyes closed. He got 2 girls pregnant the same month. You weren't the only one running, Joan. The world stopped. Alessandro's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his face went from pale to gray. What? Joan asked. Marco just sent surveillance footage from my estate. Alessandro showed her the screen. Lorenzo was there an hour ago. He went into Andrew's room, and he took something. Joan looked at the footage and felt her heart stop. On screen, Lorenzo held up one of Andrew's letters, the ones addressed to "My real mama," and smiled directly at the camera. He knows, Joan whispered. He knows I'm Andrew's mother, and now he's going to tell David. Sister Margaret's hand went limp. Her breathing stopped. Alessandro checked her pulse and shook his head. She's gone. Joan stood, backing away from the body. We need to leave. Now. If Lorenzo knows where I am. The window exploded inward in a shower of glass. Alessandro tackled Joan to the ground as bullets tore through the apartment. From outside, a voice called up rough, scarred by cigarettes and rage. Joan Cohen, I know you're in there. You took my son from me. David Russo had found them, and he wanted blood. Bullets punched through the apartment walls like angry fists. Alessandro covered Joan's body with his own, pulling her behind the overturned couch as plaster rained down around them. How many years, Joan? David Russo's voice echoed from the street below, raw with fury and madness. How many years did you keep my son from me? Alessandro pulled his gun, returning fire through the shattered window. Back door, now. They crawled across the floor, glass cutting through Joan's palms. Behind them, the front door exploded inward, kicked open by heavy boots. Men poured into the apartment, at least 4 of them, all armed. Go! Alessandro shoved Joan toward the bedroom. He fired twice, dropping the first man through the door. The others scattered, taking cover. Joan ran, her mind screaming one thought over and over. Andrew is dead, and his father wants to kill me, and it's all falling apart. Alessandro was right behind her, slamming the bedroom door and shoving a dresser against it. The window. Fire escape. Joan looked out. 3 stories down. Rusty metal ladder. David Russo's men circling the building like wolves. We'll never make it, she gasped. We don't have a choice. Alessandro fired 3 shots through the bedroom door as it shook under heavy impacts. When I say go, you climb. Don't look back. Don't stop. Marco is 2 blocks away, he'll get you out. What about you? I'll be right behind you. Alessandro reloaded with practiced efficiency. Joan, when you get out of here, you run. You disappear. You don't look back. I'm not leaving you. You don't get a choice. Alessandro grabbed her shoulders, eyes blazing. If David takes you, he'll torture you for answers about Andrew. And when he finds out our son is dead, he'll make you suffer for every moment he missed. I won't let that happen. The bedroom door cracked. Splinters flew. Go. Now. Joan climbed through the window onto the fire escape. The metal groaned under her weight, rust flaking away like dead skin. Below, men shouted. Above, gunfire erupted. She climbed down, hands shaking, feet slipping on the wet metal. 2 stories. 1 story. Almost there. A hand grabbed her ankle. Joan looked down into David Russo's face, older than she remembered, scarred and hardened by years of violence, but still those same cold eyes that had haunted her nightmares. The eyes that had convinced an 18-year-old girl that running was the only way to survive. Hello, Joan, David said, smiling. Miss me? Joan kicked, connecting with his face. He stumbled back but didn't let go. She kicked again, harder, and his grip loosened. She fell the last 6 feet, hitting the alley pavement hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Run. She had to run, but her body wouldn't cooperate. David was already recovering, blood streaming from his nose, reaching for the gun at his hip. A shot rang out. David dropped, clutching his shoulder. Behind him, Marco appeared like an avenging angel, gun raised. 2 more of Alessandro's men flanking him. Move, Marco barked at Joan. She ran, legs finally obeying. Marco grabbed her arm, hauling her toward a black SUV idling at the alley entrance. They were 10 feet away when the church apartment exploded in a fireball that lit up the afternoon sky. Alessandro! Joan screamed, trying to turn back. Marco dragged her forward. He's not in there. He went out the front. They reached the SUV. Marco shoved Joan inside and climbed in after her. The driver floored it, tires screaming. Joan pressed her face against the window, watching the church burn. Where is he? Where's Alessandro? He'll call when he's clear, Marco said, but his expression betrayed his doubt. Joan's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered with shaking hands. Joan Cohen. Lorenzo's smooth voice slithered through the speaker. I hope you enjoyed meeting Andrew's father. David's been very eager to reconnect with family. You bastard, Joan breathed. You killed Andrew. You murdered a child to take over Alessandro's empire. I eliminated a weakness. Lorenzo's voice was cold. Alessandro was going soft. Building schools, funding charities, talking about going legitimate. That's not what the Moretti family does. We're wolves, not sheep. And wolves don't raise other men's bastards as heirs. He was 7 years old. He was a lie, a pretender. And now he's gone. Lorenzo laughed. But don't worry, you'll be joining him soon. David is very disappointed to learn his son is dead, and he blames you for not telling him the boy existed. For stealing 7 years he could have spent being a father. David would have destroyed him, Joan said. I saved Andrew from that monster. And yet Andrew still ended up dead. Funny how that worked out. Lorenzo's voice sharpened. I'm going to give you a choice, Joan. You can run, hide, disappear. But I'll find you eventually. Or you can meet me tonight at the old Riverside warehouse. Come alone, bring no weapons, and I'll tell you exactly how your son died, who held him underwater, how long it took, whether he called for his mama. Joan's vision blurred with tears and rage. Why would I walk into a trap? Because Alessandro will be there, and if you don't show up by midnight, I'll kill him the same way I killed Andrew. Lorenzo paused. Slowly, the line went dead. Marco grabbed the phone from her hand. That was Lorenzo. What did he say? It's a trap. He wants me at the Riverside warehouse at midnight. Joan looked at Marco. Where's Alessandro? Really? Marco's jaw tightened. He went after David, told me to get you to safety and wait for his call. But that was 20 minutes ago, and he's not answering, because Lorenzo has him. Joan's hands clenched into fists. This was the plan all along. Lure us to Sister Margaret, have David attack, separate us, take Alessandro. Then we call every soldier in the organization. We go in with an army, and Lorenzo kills him before we get through the door. Joan shook her head. No, he wants me. This whole thing has been about eliminating everyone who knew the truth about Andrew's adoption. Sister Margaret, dead. Marco Castellano, dead. Now he wants me dead too, and he's using Alessandro as bait. You can't go alone. I won't. Joan pulled out her phone, scrolling through the photos she'd taken of her investigation wall before they'd left her apartment. But we need proof. Something that ties Lorenzo to Andrew's murder. Something his organization can't ignore. Marco leaned forward. What are you thinking? Lorenzo made a mistake. He kept records, photos, evidence of his coup attempt. Joan zoomed in on one of her surveillance photos. Lorenzo meeting with someone outside a restaurant. This was taken 3 weeks before Andrew died. The man he's meeting? That's Vincent Caruso, head of the rival Caruso family. Marco's eyes widened. Lorenzo was negotiating with our enemies. Not just negotiating, planning. If we can prove Lorenzo was working with the Carusos to take down Alessandro, the organization will turn on him. Joan looked at Marco. But we need hard evidence, bank records, communications, something undeniable. I know where Lorenzo keeps his private files, Marco said slowly. His penthouse, top floor safe, but it's guarded. And if we're wrong, we're not wrong. Joan's voice was steel. Lorenzo killed my son. He's trying to kill the man who raised him. And he won't stop until everyone who can expose him is dead. She met Marco's eyes. Help me stop him, please. Marco studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Alessandro trusted you. That's enough for me. He leaned forward to the driver. Take us to Lorenzo's penthouse. Back entrance. As the SUV changed direction, Joan stared out the window at the burning church. Somewhere in this city, David Russo was wounded and angry. Lorenzo was preparing his endgame. And Alessandro was trapped in the middle. She pulled out the ultrasound photo she'd carried for 7 years, the only picture she had of Andrew before he was born. Before she gave him away. Before everything went wrong. I'm sorry, baby, she whispered. I couldn't save you, but I can make them pay. The SUV pulled into an underground garage. Marco checked his gun, handed Joan a spare. You know how to use this. Joan checked the chamber with practiced ease. I learned a lot in the neighborhood where I raised myself. Marco smiled grimly. Alessandro was right about you. You're stronger than you look. I'm a mother who lost her child, Joan said simply. There's nothing stronger or more dangerous than that. They exited the vehicle and moved toward the service elevator. Lorenzo's penthouse was 12 floors up. Between them and the truth were guards, locked doors, and an army of men loyal to a traitor. But Joan had survived David Russo. She'd survived 7 years of grief and guilt. She'd survive this too, because Andrew deserved justice. And Joan was going to deliver it personally. The elevator doors opened, and the real war began. Lorenzo's penthouse was a temple to greed and ambition. Joan moved through the marble foyer like a ghost, gun raised, Marco beside her. They'd taken out 2 guards in the service corridor quietly, efficiently. The bodies were hidden in a supply closet. They had maybe 20 minutes before someone noticed. Safe is in the study, Marco whispered. 3rd door on the right. They moved silently past walls covered in expensive art. Joan recognized some of the paintings stolen, probably. Trophies from Lorenzo's various criminal enterprises. Everything in this place was taken from someone else. Just like he'd tried to take Alessandro's empire. Just like he'd taken Andrew's life. The study was exactly what Joan expected. Dark wood, leather chairs, a desk that probably cost more than her entire year's salary, and behind a painting of the Roman Colosseum, a wall safe. "Can you open it?" Joan asked. Marco pulled out a small device, pressed it against the safe's keypad. "Give me 2 minutes." Joan moved to Lorenzo's desk, started opening drawers. Financial documents, shipping manifests, nothing immediately useful. Then her hand found a locked drawer at the bottom. She shot the lock. Inside was a laptop and 3 USB drives labeled with dates. Joan grabbed them all, shoving them into her jacket. Whatever Lorenzo was hiding, it was here. "Got it," Marco said as the safe clicked open. Inside were stacks of cash, passports with different names, and a leather folder. Marco grabbed the folder, flipped it open. His face went pale. "What?" Joan moved beside him. The folder contained photographs. Andrew at the park, Andrew at school, Andrew by the pool. Dozens of surveillance photos taken over months. And beneath them, a contract payment records showing large sums transferred to Marco Castellano's account. Payments that stopped the day Andrew died. Lorenzo paid Marco to watch Andrew, Joan breathed. To document his routines, to find the perfect moment. And when the job was done, Lorenzo killed him to cover his tracks. Marco's hands shook with rage. "Castellano was my friend. We trained together. I thought he died honorably. He died as a pawn." Joan kept flipping through documents. Bank transfers to the Caruso family. Emails discussing removing the heir. Text messages between Lorenzo and someone labeled Dr. David Russo. Planning, plotting, months of conspiracy. And at the bottom, a handwritten note in Lorenzo's elegant script. "The bastard drowns tomorrow, 2 p.m. Housekeeper's day off. Alessandro in the city. Perfect timing. Once the boy is gone and Alessandro is weakened by grief, the Carusos move. 6 months, and the empire is mine." Joan's vision blurred with tears of rage. He planned everything, every detail. Andrew's death wasn't spontaneous. It was calculated murder. "This is enough," Marco said, pulling out his phone. "This proves Lorenzo betrayed the family. The organization will turn on him. We can The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Alarms began to wail. "He knows we're here," Joan said. The study door slammed open. 4 men poured in, guns raised. Not Lorenzo's usual guards, these were professionals. Military precision. Dead eyes. "Drop your weapons," the lead man said in a thick accent. Russian, Joan realized. Lorenzo had hired foreign muscle. Marco fired first. The room erupted in chaos, muzzle flashes, the stink of gunpowder, screaming. Joan dove behind the desk, returning fire. 1 mercenary dropped, then another, but there were more coming. Joan could hear boots pounding up the stairs. "Go." Marco shoved the folder into her hands. "Take the evidence and go. I'm not leaving you. Alessandro needs you alive. Andrew needs justice." Marco fired 3 more shots, giving her cover. "There's a service exit behind the bookshelf. Go." Joan hesitated for 1 heartbeat. Then she ran. Behind her, gunfire intensified. She heard Marco grunt in pain but didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The evidence in her hands was the only thing that mattered now. She found the bookshelf, pulled the hidden lever Marco had described. A panel slid open, revealing a narrow stairwell. Joan plunged into darkness, taking stairs 2 at a time. Behind her, the gunfire stopped. She burst out into an alley, gasping for air. The SUV was gone, probably moved by Lorenzo's men. She was alone in hostile territory with evidence that could topple an empire. Her phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Marco is dead. You're next. But first, let's talk about your boyfriend. Riverside Warehouse. You have 1 hour. Come alone or Alessandro dies screaming. L. Attached was a photo. Alessandro tied to a chair, blood running down his face, eyes defiant even in captivity. Joan stared at the image, feeling something break and reform inside her. She'd lost Andrew. She'd lost 7 years she could never get back. She'd watched her son grow from a distance, loving him in silence, and someone had stolen him from the world. No more. She pulled up her contacts, called the one person who might actually help. The line clicked. This is Detective Sarah Chen, Major Crimes. Detective, my name is Joan Cohen. I have evidence of a murder conspiracy involving the Moretti crime family, but I need your help, and I need it now. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm listening. Alessandro Moretti's 7-year-old son was murdered 6 months ago. It was ruled an accidental drowning, but it wasn't. It was a hit, ordered by Lorenzo Moretti to seize control of the organization. Joan's voice was steady, cold. I have documents, photos, bank records, communications, everything you need to take down half the criminal infrastructure in this city. Where did you get this evidence? That doesn't matter. What matters is that Lorenzo is holding Alessandro hostage right now at the Riverside Warehouse. He wants me to trade myself for Alessandro's life. I'm going to do it, but I need you to be ready. Miss Cohen, if you walk into a hostage situation, I'm going to get Alessandro out, and I'm going to make Lorenzo confess to murdering my son. Joan's voice cracked. Andrew Moretti was my biological son. I gave him up for adoption 7 years ago, to protect him from his abusive father. Lorenzo killed him anyway, and now I'm going to make sure he pays for it. Chen's voice softened. Joan, let us handle this. Don't throw your life away. My life was thrown away the moment Andrew died. Joan looked at the photo of Alessandro, beaten but unbroken. But I can still save someone. I can still get justice. I just need you to trust me. What do you need? Give me 2 hours. Don't send anyone to the warehouse until you hear from me. But when I call, I need you to come with everything you have. SWAT, negotiators, the works. Joan pulled up the files on Lorenzo's laptop. I'm sending you everything now. Encrypted files. Password is Andrew2018. It's enough to bury Lorenzo and everyone who helped him. Joan. Detective, I was 18 years old when I gave birth to my son. I thought I was giving him a better life. Instead, I gave him to a world that killed him for being inconvenient. Joan's voice hardened. I couldn't protect him then, but I can protect his memory now. And I can make damn sure the man who killed him never hurts anyone else. She hung up before Chen could argue. The files uploaded to a secure server. Joan sent the link to Chen's official email, then destroyed the laptop. The physical evidence, the folder, the photographs, the handwritten confession she kept. Lorenzo would want it back. That was her leverage. Joan checked her gun. Fully loaded. She found a spare magazine in her jacket pocket. Not enough firepower to take on an army, but enough to make a point. Her phone showed the time. 11:07 p.m. 53 minutes until Lorenzo's deadline. Joan started walking toward the warehouse district. Every step felt heavy, inevitable. This was always where it was going to end, her and the man who'd murdered her child, facing each other in the dark. She thought about Andrew, about his letters to a mother he never knew, about the paintings of a woman who looked like her, about 7 years of love she'd never gotten to give him. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, baby, she whispered to the night. But I'm going to make them remember you. I'm going to make them understand what they took from the world. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and silent. Joan could see figures moving inside Lorenzo's men, positioned at every entrance. She counted at least 8, maybe more. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and walking into a trap. But Joan Cohen had nothing left to lose except the truth. And tonight, the truth was going to burn everything down. She walked toward the warehouse entrance, hands raised, gun visible but not threatening. A man stepped out of the shadows, Lorenzo Moretti, immaculate in a suit despite the late hour, smiling like he'd already won. "Joan, so glad you could make it." He gestured inside. "Alessandro is eager to see you. Well, what's left of him. I want to see him first. Proof he's alive." "Of course. I'm a man of honor." Lorenzo's smile widened. "Unlike you. Tell me, did Alessandro cry when you told him you were Andrew's birth mother? Did he scream? Did he blame you for giving away a child who ended up dead anyway?" Joan said nothing. She couldn't. If she spoke, she'd start shooting, and she needed Alessandro alive first. Lorenzo led her inside. The warehouse was cavernous, empty except for a single chair in the center where Alessandro sat, beaten but conscious. His eyes found Joan's, and she saw something in them that broke her heart, not fear, but apology. "I'm sorry," Alessandro mouthed. Lorenzo pulled out a gun, pressed it against Alessandro's head. "Now then, let's talk about my cousin's bastard son, and how you're both going to die for him." "Put down the gun, Joan," Lorenzo said calmly, pressing his weapon harder against Alessandro's temple. "Or I paint the floor with my cousin's brain." Joan set her gun on the concrete floor, kicking it toward Lorenzo's feet. "I'm unarmed. Let him go." "Oh, I don't think so. Not yet." Lorenzo circled Alessandro's chair like a shark. "First, I want to hear you say it. I want you to tell Alessandro exactly who you are, what you did, why his precious son, the boy he mourned for 6 months, was never really his at all." Alessandro's eyes never left Joan's face. Blood dripped from his split lip. "I already know," she told me. Lorenzo's smile faltered. "She told you?" "Everything. The adoption, David Russo, the abuse, the choice she made to protect Andrew." Alessandro's voice was hoarse but steady. "She gave him up so he'd have a chance at life. You took that life away. I eliminated a threat to this family's legacy." Lorenzo's composure cracked. "You were going soft, Alessandro, building schools, funding orphanages, talking about going legitimate. You were weak, and that boy, that bastard child of a nobody, was making you weaker every day." "He was 7 years old," Joan said quietly. "He liked pink roses. He drew pictures of his father waiting for him to come home. He wanted to be a doctor when he grew up so he could help people." Her voice strengthened. "And you drowned him in a pool because he was inconvenient." "I did what needed to be done." Lorenzo's gun trembled. "This organization was built on blood and power, not charity and sentiment. Andrew's death was necessary. Your grief made you vulnerable, Alessandro. Made the transition of power inevitable. Except you forgot something," Alessandro said. "You're not the only one who can plan ahead." Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Marco didn't die for nothing." Joan pulled the leather folder from her jacket, holding it up. "Your confession, handwritten, payment records to Marco Castellano, communications with the Caruso family, everything you've been doing for the past 8 months, documented in your own hand." Lorenzo's face went white. "You were in my penthouse. We have copies, multiple copies, encrypted and sent to people who know exactly what to do with them." Joan smiled coldly. "Right now, Detective Sarah Chen of Major Crimes is reviewing every piece of evidence we collected. Bank records, photos, your conspiracy to murder a child and seize control of the Moretti family." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Joan's phone buzzed. She pulled it out slowly, showing Lorenzo the screen. Text from Chen. Evidence received. SWAT mobilizing. ETA 12 minutes. Keep him talking. Lorenzo's gun swung toward Joan. "You stupid bitch. You just signed both your death warrants." "Maybe. But you're coming down with us." Joan took a step forward. "Andrew deserves justice, and you're going to give it to him." Andrew was a mistake, a weakness. He deserved exactly what he got. The words hung in the air for one crystalline moment. Then Alessandro moved. His hands weren't tied as securely as Lorenzo thought. Alessandro had been working the ropes loose for the past hour. He lunged sideways, the chair toppling, and Lorenzo's shot went wide. Joan dove for her gun. Lorenzo's men poured in from the shadows, 4, 5, 6 of them. The warehouse erupted in chaos. Joan came up shooting. 2 men dropped. Alessandro tackled Lorenzo, both of them crashing into equipment. Fists flying. Years of brotherhood turned to violence. A hand grabbed Joan's hair, yanking her backward. She twisted, elbow connecting with her attacker's throat. He dropped, choking. Another man rushed her. She shot him twice, Center Mass. Across the warehouse, Alessandro and Lorenzo were locked in brutal combat. Alessandro's face was a mask of rage and grief. Every punch thrown for Andrew, for the life stolen, for the trust betrayed. "He was my son," Alessandro roared, his fist connecting with Lorenzo's jaw. "Mine, and you took him from me." Lorenzo spat blood. "He was never yours. He was some whore's bastard that Gabriella bought to keep you satisfied." Alessandro's hands found Lorenzo's throat. "Say his name." "What?" "Say his name." Alessandro's grip tightened. "You killed him. The least you can do is say his name." Lorenzo struggled, face turning purple. "Andrew." His name was Andrew. "Andrew Moretti." Alessandro's voice broke. "My son. My boy. The best thing I never deserved. And you took him from the world because you wanted power." "Alessandro, don't." Joan ran over, touching his shoulder. "Don't kill him. Let him rot in prison. Let him live knowing he failed." For a moment, Alessandro's hands tightened further. Lorenzo's eyes bulged, desperate. Then Alessandro released him, letting him collapse to the floor gasping. "You're right." Alessandro stood, chest heaving. Death is too easy for him. A voice cut through the warehouse. "Nobody move." David Russo stood at the entrance, gun raised, 3 men behind him. His face was a mask of fury and pain, the wound on his shoulder bleeding through his shirt. "Where is he?" David's voice shook. "Where's my son?" Joan's blood ran cold. "David. Lorenzo told me everything. Said you took Andrew from me, gave him to this piece of shit." David gestured at Alessandro with the gun. 7 years I could have had with my boy. 7 years you stole. "Your son is dead," Joan said quietly. "Andrew died 6 months ago. Lorenzo killed him." David's face crumbled. No, you're lying. He drowned in a pool." Joan's voice was steady despite her tears. "He was 7 years old. He loved pink roses and wanted to be a doctor. And Lorenzo Moretti murdered him to take over the family business." David turned to Lorenzo, who was climbing to his feet. "You told me he was alive. You said you'd help me get him back." "I lied." Lorenzo smiled through bloody teeth. "I needed your muscle. I told you what you wanted to hear. The boy was already dead." David's gun trembled. "You used my son's death to manipulate me? Your son was nobody. A mistake. Just like you." David pulled the trigger. Lorenzo went down, clutching his stomach, screaming. "That's for my boy," David said. Then he turned the gun on Joan. "And this is for the 7 years you stole from me." "David, wait." Alessandro stepped in front of Joan. "Move aside, Moretti." "No." Alessandro stood firm. "Joan gave Andrew up to protect him from you. She knew what kind of man you were, what you'd do to a child. She saved him from you. She took him from me. She gave him a life." Alessandro's voice rang through the warehouse. "A good life. A safe life. He had a home, an education, love. Everything you would have destroyed with your violence and rage. Joan saved Andrew. Lorenzo killed him. Aim your gun at the right person." David's hands shook. Tears streamed down his face. "I never got to meet him. Never got to tell him I was sorry. That I would have changed. That I could have been better." "You couldn't have," Joan said softly. "I know you, David. You don't change. You would have turned Andrew into another version of yourself. Angry, violent, destructive. I gave him up so he could be better than both of us. And now he's gone." David's gun lowered slightly. "My son is gone, and I never even got to see his face." Joan pulled out her phone, scrolled to a photo she'd taken from Alessandro's estate. Andrew smiling, covered in paint, holding up one of his artwork pieces. "This is Andrew," she said, holding up the phone. "This is your son. Beautiful, happy, creative, everything you weren't, everything I couldn't be alone. He had a good life, David. Short, but good." David stared at the photo, and something broke in him. The gun clattered to the floor. He collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Detective Chen's voice crackled through a megaphone. "This is the police. The building is surrounded. Come out with your hands up." Alessandro grabbed Joan's hand. "We need to go. Now." "What about them?" Joan gestured at Lorenzo, bleeding on the floor, and David, broken and weeping. "They're done. Both of them." Alessandro pulled her toward the back exit. "Let the police handle it. We've done what we came for." They ran through the warehouse as SWAT teams poured through the front entrance. Behind them, Lorenzo was being arrested, screaming about lawyers and immunity. David Russo sat motionless, staring at the photo of the son he'd never know. Alessandro and Joan burst out into the night air, running until they reached an abandoned lot 3 blocks away. Only then did they stop, gasping for breath. "It's over," Alessandro said. "Lorenzo's finished. The evidence will put him away forever. Andrew still won't come back." Joan's voice was hollow. "No, he won't." Alessandro pulled her into his arms. "But we made sure he didn't die for nothing. We made sure the truth came out. That's something." Joan clung to him, this man who'd raised her son, who'd loved him despite never being his blood, who'd been willing to die to protect her. "What happens now?" she whispered. Alessandro pulled back, looking into her eyes. "Now we heal. Together. We honor Andrew's memory. We make sure the world knows what kind of person he was. And we make damn sure nothing like this ever happens again. I don't know how to heal from this. Neither do I." Alessandro's hand found hers. "But maybe we figure it out together." In the distance, police lights painted the sky red and blue. Somewhere in that chaos, Lorenzo Moretti was facing justice. David Russo was facing the consequences of his violence. And Andrew's death finally meant something. Joan looked up at Alessandro, this dangerous man who'd become her partner, her ally, "Thank you," she said, "for believing me, for fighting for him." "Thank you for giving him life," Alessandro replied, "even if I wasted too much of the time I had with him." They stood together in the dark, 2 broken people bound by impossible grief and unexpected understanding. The war was over. But the healing had only just begun. 3 months later, Joan stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of her dress. Black, simple, appropriate for the occasion. Her hands no longer shook when she looked at her reflection. The haunted woman who'd cried at a stranger's grave had been replaced by someone harder, stronger, but also somehow more at peace. "You ready?" Alessandro's voice came from the doorway. Joan turned to face him. He wore a dark suit, always a suit, but something about him had changed too. The cold, dangerous edge had softened, not disappeared, but tempered by something that looked almost like hope. "As ready as I'll ever be," she said. They drove to Sacred Heart Cemetery in comfortable silence. The same cemetery where this had all begun, where Joan had knelt at Andrew's grave and unleashed a chain of events that had destroyed an empire and exposed a murder. The graves looked different now, fresh flowers everywhere. The rain had stopped weeks ago, replaced by tentative spring sunshine that made everything feel like a promise of renewal. But they weren't going to Andrew's grave. Not yet. First, they had something else to do. The memorial garden was new built in the past 2 months, with money from Alessandro's accounts. A peaceful corner of the cemetery transformed into something beautiful. Stone benches, a fountain, flowers that bloomed year-round, and at its center, a bronze statue of a child releasing a dove into the sky. The plaque beneath read, "Andrew Moretti Memorial Garden. In memory of all children lost to violence. May they find peace in a world that failed to protect them." 50 people gathered around the statue, survivors of violence, families who'd lost children, social workers from Street Catherine's new administration. The adoption agency had been completely restructured after the scandal, with new leadership committed to protecting vulnerable mothers and children. Joan took her place beside Alessandro at the front. She pulled out the speech she'd prepared, hands steady. "3 months ago, I stood at my son's grave as a stranger," she began. "I couldn't claim him publicly. Couldn't tell the world that the boy buried there had come from me. All I could do was cry and leave flowers and wonder if giving him up had been the right choice." She paused, looking at the faces watching her. "Today, I can stand here and say his name. Andrew Moretti was my son. I gave birth to him 7 years ago. I gave him up because I thought it would save him from a violent man who would have destroyed him. And for 7 years I watched from the shadows, making sure he was safe and loved and happy." Tears threatened, but Joan pushed through. "Andrew died because evil men saw him as a pawn in their games for power. They looked at a 7-year-old child and saw only an obstacle to be removed. But Andrew was so much more than that. He was an artist, a dreamer, a little boy who wanted to be a doctor so he could help people. He deserved decades of life. He deserved to grow up, fall in love, change the world. Instead, he got 7 years. And that is the debt we can never repay." Alessandro stepped forward, placing his hand on Joan's shoulder, She found strength in the gesture and continued. So we built this garden, not just for Andrew, but for every child taken too soon by violence. Every child who deserved better than the world gave them. This is a place to remember, to grieve, and to commit ourselves to making sure their deaths mean something. Joan's voice strengthened. We can't bring them back, but we can honor them by protecting the children who are still here, by fighting for them, by making this world safer, kinder, more just. She stepped back, and Alessandro took her place. I was not Andrew's biological father, Alessandro said quietly. I found out after he died that my wife had adopted him, that his birth mother had given him up to protect him. For days I was angry. I felt betrayed. But then I realized something. Biology doesn't make you a father. Being present does. Loving them does. Protecting them does. His voice cracked. And I failed at all of those things. I was too busy building an empire to build a relationship with my son. I missed birthdays, school events, bedtimes. I told myself I'd have time later, that I was providing for him. But what Andrew needed wasn't money or power. He needed me, and I wasn't there. Alessandro looked at the statue. Lorenzo Moretti is in prison now. He'll spend the rest of his life paying for what he did. David Russo, Andrew's biological father, took a plea deal 20 years for conspiracy and assault. The men who helped them are facing justice, but Andrew is still gone, and no amount of revenge brings him back. He turned to face the crowd. So instead of revenge, we choose purpose. The Andrew Moretti Foundation will provide resources to single mothers in crisis, legal protection, financial support, counseling, everything Joan didn't have when she was 18 and terrified. We're going to make sure other mothers don't have to make the choice she did, and when they do make that choice, we're going to make sure their children are protected, that adoptions are handled with integrity, that children aren't seen as commodities but as human beings deserving of love and safety. The crowd applauded. Joan felt tears streaming down her face, but they were different tears now, not just grief, but determination. After the ceremony, people approached one by one, mothers who'd given up children, fathers who'd lost them to violence, families destroyed by crime and poverty. Each one shared a story. Each one thanked them for creating something meaningful from tragedy. Finally, when everyone else had left, Joan and Alessandro walked together to Andrew's grave. The pink roses Joan had brought 3 months ago had long since wilted, but fresh ones sat there now placed by Alessandro, she realized. He'd been coming regularly. I read him the letters, Alessandro said quietly. The ones he wrote to his real mama. I thought you should know. I told him that you loved him, that you never stopped thinking about him, that giving him up was the hardest thing you'd ever done. Joan's hand found his. Thank you. I also told him about you, the real you. Not the idea he had, but the woman you are. Brave, strong, relentless. He would have been proud to know you, and he was proud to have you as his father. I saw it in his drawings. The man in the suit waiting for him. He loved you, Alessandro. Even when you weren't there, he loved you. They stood together, letting the spring sun warm their faces. I've been thinking, Alessandro said, about the future, about what comes next. And I'm stepping back from the organization, not leaving completely, that's not possible in my world, but delegating, spending less time on business and more time on the foundation, on making sure Andrew's legacy is something meaningful. He turned to her. And I was hoping you'd help me, not as an employee, as a partner, co-director of the foundation, someone who understands what we're trying to do because you've lived it. Joan looked at him, this man who'd started as a stranger at a cemetery, become an ally in investigation, transformed into something she still didn't have words for. Not quite romance, though there were moments when it felt close. Not quite family, though they were bound by something deeper than blood. I'd like that, she said. Alessandro smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Good, because I'm tired of doing this alone, and I think Andrew would want us to do this together. He would. Joan placed her own flowers beside his pink roses and white lilies. He'd want us to honor him by being better. By doing better. Then that's what we'll do. They stood at the grave for a long time, two broken people who'd found purpose in shared loss. The sun climbed higher, warming the cemetery, chasing away the last shadows of grief with the promise of spring. I forgive you, Joan whispered, and she wasn't sure if she was talking to herself, to Alessandro, or to Andrew. Maybe all three. I forgive you for dying. I forgive me for giving you up. I forgive all of us for failing you, and I promise we'll do better. For you, for all the children who come after you. Alessandro's hand tightened around hers. We will. I promise. They turned and walked away from the grave together, not forgetting, never forgetting, but finally ready to move forward. Behind them, the bronze statue in the memorial garden caught the sunlight. A child releasing a dove, a symbol of freedom, hope, and second chances. Andrew Moretti had lived only 7 years, but his legacy would last forever. And the debt of blood had finally been paid, not with more violence, but with love, purpose, and the promise that his death would prevent others. In the end, that was all anyone could ask for. That was enough. If you want more stories that make you feel something, stories filled with romance, tension, and unforgettable twists, then subscribe to Bella's Romance Stories. We're building a community of people who believe in powerful, emotional storytelling. Join us. Hit that subscribe button, explore our other videos, and let's keep bringing stories to life. Stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. See you in the comments, and tell me your favorite moment from this story.